Collaborative Space Ventures, India-Australia Collaborative Space Ventures. We explore experiences and insights from collaborative space ventures between India and Australia, delving into the achievements, challenges, and future prospects. Please welcome Mr. Jeremy Hallet, Executive Chair, SIA-Australia. Welcome, sir. Join me in welcoming our distinguished panelists. Firstly, Ms. Nashid Chowdhury, Investment and Trade Commissioner, India Gulf, Government of Western Australia. Welcome, ma'am. Dr. Subba Pavuluri, CMD, Ananth Technologies. Welcome, sir. Mr. Venkat, Pillay, CEO and founder, Lal Connect 60. Welcome, sir. Mr. Rajat Kulshrestha, co-founder and CEO, Space Machine Company. Welcome, sir. Mr. Anirudh Sharma, founder and CEO, Digantara. Welcome, sir. Mr. Shireesh, Pallikonda, Director, Business Development, Skyroot. Mr. Leo Bremanis, Trade and Investment Commissioner, Australian High Commission. We'll be virtually joined by Mr. Arvind, Ramana, Director, Space Programs, Australian Space Agency. Welcome, sir. And I request Mr. Arvind Ramana to please address the gathering. Thank you very much. And over to our moderator, Mr. Jeremy Hallet. Sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jeremy Hallett's my name. I'm the chairman at the Space Industry Association of Australia. Many thanks to SIA-INDIA for having us at the India Space Congress, with today seeming like a bit of an Australia Day, which has been excellent, one session after another. You would have heard this morning from our High Commissioner to India. Recently, the Australian government awarded approximately $18 million in projects to 3 Australian companies who are leading actual space projects in collaboration with Indian industry. And we're going to explore those projects today, hear from the companies involved, and also hear from both the Australian Space Agency and Austrade about why Australia and India doing business is a good idea. To start off that discussion, we have Arvind Ramana from the Australian Space Agency joining us remotely from Australia, I assume. And I'll hand over to you now, Arvind.
Thanks, Jeremy. Are you guys able to hear me? Awesome. Sorry about the IT issues. I'll start off with thanking the organizers first. Obviously, it's my immense pride and privilege to be delivering this special address today. Special to me personally, as I'm representing my homeland in my motherland, which makes me pretty proud. And thanks are due to the organizing committee and the team for organizing this virtual link and going through all the pain in having me there virtually. I feel missed out, but I will be there in India, hopefully for the Bengaluru Space Expo. So looking forward to it. So I'm Arvind Ramana, Director for Space Programs at the Australian Space Agency. You will hear this about a lot in this conference coming days, and you have some great speakers on stage, so I'm not going to take too much time. I want to highlight India and Australia's partnership in space. It's not new. We have had very strong partnerships, but the recent years and the developments in the recent years has just elevated this partnership to another level. I should highlight the India-Australia Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. The space was a key element in the bilateral relationship highlighted by our Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Further highlighting this cooperation was the 2021 MOU signed, the Memorandum of Understanding signed by the Australian Space Agency with ISRO. So these frameworks underpin our relationships and further highlighted by very strong partnerships and programs such as the Square Kilometre Array collaboration between our nations, and of course the historic Gaganyaan human spaceflight program, and Australia's role in supporting the Chandrayaan program. These are historic. These are legendary programs, and having been able to support India in some of these activities is a privilege by itself, and we are privileged to be part of these historic endeavors to the moon, Mars, and beyond that India is leading. And of course, I should talk about the India ISI, the International Space Investment Initiative India project stream. This was originally a $21 million program that was announced by us while we were at BSX 2022. And since then, it has been a great journey. It has been a long journey, but it has been highly rewarding. And obviously, as Jeremy mentioned, we announced a couple of months ago $18 million invested in 3 collaborative space projects. And this is building upon all the previous work that has been done in the comprehensive and strategic partnerships and several other collaborations in the past. Just quickly touching upon some of our achievements since the SIA-INDIA program was announced. And as I mentioned, we made the announcement during the BSX 2022, and we called it under 2 rounds. What we are currently is round number 1, where we have allocated $18 million. In terms of what the guidelines were, we had a minimum grant amount of $1 million and a maximum grant amount of $10 million. We expected some really good applications, and we did receive some really good applications. Around 60 plus applications were received, with an average of around 5 to 7 participating organizations per application. So this program itself, during this process, saw over 300 organizations involved. There was an equal split between India and Australia, so which means we did have a lot of collaborations that were created during this program. Of course, we were not able to support every meritorious application. We were able to support only the top 3 meritorious applications that you will learn more about today and in the future. But what it meant was basically that we were overwhelmed and highly enthusiastic to see the collaborations that were created during these programs. Even the webinar that we had during the ISI-INDIA announcement, we saw over 40 Australian and Indian organizations participate. We had several of them present and pitch, and from that, we saw several applications come into the application process. So, and also not to mention the reception that we received while we were at BSX, and the reception that was received in the social media and print and media as well. It was highly encouraging. So the way I see it is, this is just a start. And it was also a great experience working with ISRO and NSIL and in space during this process. We collaboratively were able to identify priority areas that I've listed here: advanced manufacturing, AI and cybersecurity, position and navigation and timing, space medicine and life sciences, space situational awareness, and workforce resilience and skills related projects. And several of these projects that we have funded kind of sat over several of these priority areas, talking further to the importance of space as an enabler for all the important things that we're doing in terms of technology and critical technologies. Again, I'm not going to go into the details here because you will learn about these projects from the industry themselves. Space Machines Company with their Space Mach 3 mission, Lal Connect 60, the SWERSAT mission, and Skycraft for a collaborative PNT in LEO mission. Again, without going into too much detail, several priority areas were ticked in these 3 projects, highly meritorious, highly competitive, and we look forward for these projects developing, and we look forward for these projects to deliver the outcomes and strong collaboration between our both great nations. So, again, as I mentioned, what we are is at a starting point. As I mentioned, 60 plus projects applied, and we hope to see these collaborations, even though they were not funded, go ahead and continue and foster and thrive. We see these 3 major projects to deliver outcomes and launch to space in the next 3 to 4 years. We are looking forward to it, and working with India and the Indian industry and the Indian government has been a huge pleasure. And we look forward to continuing these collaborations in the coming years as well. Australia, we are looking forward to welcome our Indian stakeholders and counterparts to Australia in the coming years. We have some major space conferences coming up this year and the next year, and we are known to be great hosts. So please do visit Australia, get in touch with us, and we look forward to welcoming you all there. And with that, I will conclude, and I will pass it back to Jeremy, and I look forward to hearing the conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Arvind. Appreciate that, and appreciate your tenacity in leading the program as it's come to fruition with contracts now being signed. We have a large panel today. I'm keen for you to all learn who each of the individuals are, but I might get them to introduce themselves as I ask questions. And as this Congress is nicely themed, Bridging Boundaries, Transforming Tomorrow, panelists, when you introduce yourselves, I'd like you to say your name, where you're from, and one way you'd like to see space transform tomorrow, looking out into the future. And I'll give you a few more seconds to think until I pick on someone. Maybe, Leo, if I could go to you first as another representative of the Australian government, but based here in India. We've heard from Arvind about some of the motivations behind the Australian government funding this sort of program. From you working here on the ground, as it were, what are some of the benefits that you see for Australian and Indian space companies to collaborate? And don't forget my question.
Shall I cover both questions all in one, or both in one hit? All right, no problem. Hi, everyone. I'm Leo Bremanis. I'm the Austrade Trade and Investment Commissioner based here in India at the Australian High Commission. I've been in India for almost 2.5 years now and look after Australian partnership with India in trade, in defence, advanced manufacturing and space. I think, first of all, to the icebreaker question, you've given me a double barrel, Jeremy, but Australia and India's relationship at the moment is absolutely at a historical high point. We signed the Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement in 2022 together. And since then, 95% of Indian goods to Australia now enter tariff-free, and 85% of Australian exports to India enter tariff-free as well. And that keeps expanding over 4 years too. A lot of that, admittedly, is in other sectors. Space is obviously in development, so that touches on agribusiness, that touches on health, that touches on infrastructure products and advanced manufactured goods, packaged goods, a number of other areas. But I really see space as not a sector and as an endpoint, but as an enabler for other sectors as well. And so the first thing I'd really like to see is that the space collaboration and the conversation that we're having evolves from space as the endpoint, but space as the beginning and as the enabler for other sectors and commerce between India and Australia, whether it's Earth observation, joint missions, or other related areas as well. So hopefully that broke the ice. On question 2, why India and Australia collaboration? There's a lot to be said for that. I don't want to be the mic hog right at the beginning, but it's Australia's geographic location, it's our world-leading technologies and our alliances that I think can really help India achieve its aim of a $40 billion space sector, space economy by 2040. India's new space policy allows for increased private sector collaboration in space, and that has seen huge growth. And the ISI is just one example of a grant administered by the Australian government that supports that kind of collaboration. To give three quick examples about how and why. The first one is that our sector is growing and we have amazing cutting edge technologies in robotics, in sensing, remote operations, quantum and remote medicine and health. We have dark skies and a favourable geographic location for space operations. It's no surprise our High Commissioner mentioned it this morning that NASA's first launch outside of the USA was in Australia for these reasons. And so we have an important strategic and geographic advantage and a great place for equatorial launch as well. And then thirdly, space is an inherently global industry. And one way that we contribute to that is through our sophisticated R&D ecosystem. So we have a lot of R&D tie-ups across the Australian states and universities. And for example, 3 Indian space startups, Digantara, Graha Space and Astrogate Labs were incubated in Australia at the University of South Australia. So 3 points of what I'm seeing on ground and the promise and the momentum that we're building on.
Thank you, Leo. Raj, if I could turn to you. You were one of the Space Machines company was one of the successful companies in this program, and congratulations on the contract announcement this morning. Firstly, tell us how you hope to see space transform tomorrow, and then secondly, can you explain what the program actually is, what it'll achieve, and also introduce to us your Indian partners in that program?
Sure. So I'm Rajit Kulshrestha. I'm CEO for Space Machines company. The way I like to see space transformed, we've seen over the last 10 years a significant drop in cost to access space, but the cost to maneuver space remains high. And until that remains high, you're not going to get sustainability and safety as a big part of having long-term critical infrastructure in space. So I think the next 10 years have to be about how do we manage infrastructure in space? How do we keep it sustainable? How do we keep it safe? And that's where what we're doing contributes to it. So that sort of answers the second part of the question. Space Maitri fits in really well with that. The objective there was to create a internationally collaborative way to investigate some of the issues that lie with debris mitigation in space, to look at what kind of problems exist currently, how do we effectively characterize debris, how do we start to look at docking, and which will sort of contribute to solving some of these problems. So Space Maitri will look to fly one of our orbital servicing vehicles on NSIL's SSLV rocket. We've got some great Indian partners in Ananth Technologies and Digantara on the panel here already. We're working with a lot more partners as part of the supply chain. And the key thing is to explore partnerships that allow us to address the use case of how do we make space and space traffic and space situational aware more effective, but at the same time also explore supply chain partnerships where India is a supply chain partner, a secure supply chain partner, but also a great commercial market for products from Australia.
Wonderful. Thank you, Raj. If I could go to you, Dr. Subba Rao, here in your day job capacity as Chairman and MD of Ananth Space, why are you part of the Space Machines program? What value did you see in collaborating with an Australian company, and what does it mean for you?
Yeah, I think I'll be answering your question a little more broadly. Okay. We not only been doing some activity along with Rajat in this company under a Maitri program and also some other companies. This is something not very innovative activity that we are trying to do right now. It is only kind of a manufacturing of activity which has been done by them on that. But what we are looking from Indian side is, the India landed on the moon, okay? Australia has not done that yet. It's not that Indian industry or Indian technology is behind any other country in the world. Now, take that into account. I wanted India and Australian collaboration should be much more than what it is today. My request is both from SIA side and also from my other association side, that the collaborative arrangement between Australia and India should be much more than what it is. The level itself is to be increased. And the allocation of funding from your side, the 18 million is too small a money for a country like Australia. So we should think something much bigger than that. And if you look at the problems that India has and Australia has in terms of development part of it, and forget about innovation side, something different. The current problems in terms of irrigation, water, agriculture, urban related, there are more or less similar activities, similar things into this, similar problems that we have. Now, India has been contributing to these areas from the space for a very long time. That is, we have programs like mission programs in this country like IMSD, that is Integrated Mission for Sustainable Development. Then finding out the groundwater entire in the countrywide. Then forest management countrywide. Like this, we have many other programs like this. So from these programs, India learned immensely. Perhaps some of those things we can pass on to Australia too on that. And similarly, Australian problems on desertification side, for example. We have also deserts here. So desertification side, maybe you can find out the solutions from you to India. At the same time, building up the payloads in the satellites, keeping in mind these problems, perhaps more high resolution and more innovative approaches can be taken up in that. So therefore, India can collaborate with you not only in terms of innovative technologies, but also in terms of manufacturing. Both ways, India can help you in that. So our request from our side is that your funding should increase much more than what it is. And India we must look at any satellite as a global in nature. And I think it's just only for the country, only for my district, for my village. No, it's not so. So that being the case, let's look at the kind of the marine issues that we have around you. And similarly, what we have around India. And we have similar problems again in this. So we request you to expand the collaborative arrangement between India and Australia much bigger than what it is. It should go exponentially. Thank you.
I think we are in heated agreement with those sentiments there around funding and the collaboration. Thank you for that. We talked a bit about the Earth's observation there, and Venkat here, his company Lal Connect 60 was also another successful recipient of the ISI-INDIA grant. Firstly, Venkat, how are you going to use space to transform tomorrow? And secondly, can you tell me a bit about your program and your Indian partners?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having us. So Venkat Pillay here, founder and CEO of Lal Connect 60. My vision for space is actually, and in the theme of Australia-India collaboration, is to look at actually networked space assets. So think of a future where satellites from both countries could actually communicate with each other in orbit to solve common challenges in a fully autonomous way. I'm not going to get into the technical details of it on this panel, but happy to have a chat on how that's feasible in the short term through combined use of technologies. But Lal Connect 60 as a company, we focused very much on the mid to downstream of Earth observation for the last 5 years. So our focus is actually using existing Earth observation satellites that are available either through government or commercial partners and deriving analytics products that could be used across Australia, Western Australian government, a key client end user of our data for agriculture, for water quality monitoring, for resource and carbon emissions monitoring. And then across into Southeast Asia, we have 4 Southeast Asian countries that are actively using our data and services for looking at crop yields for small farmers. The Malaysian government, for example, has over 150,000 small farmers that are on our smart farming platform. So that helped us drive the demand to now look at going upstream and working with the Australian Space Agency now under this ISI-INDIA program to get a satellite funded that will give us the next best in class data sources that we need to solve our challenges in agriculture and carbon emissions monitoring and net zero carbon monitoring. So we're very much focused on those areas. The ISI-INDIA funded program will basically fund a satellite that will have leading edge shortwave infrared sensors, and that will help us with soil moisture indices at a very high level of granularity for our small farmers, but it will also help us in picking up source level emissions for oil and gas and other industries. And that's aligned across India and Australia in terms of hitting net zero carbon targets. So both countries have set targets aside that they need to hit. The United Nations has come out and said satellite data and satellite data sources are key, good use of third-party verification for net zero carbon and monitoring how you're achieving those targets. But we need better data sources from space. And the current satellites that are available are just too low resolution, in my opinion, to give you source-level data collection and analytics. And that's what we're trying to change. And I'm very excited with our partnership with Skyroot Aerospace, being able to actually build a satellite of that level of sophistication in Australia, and then getting it launched in India by a leading launch company here. I think that's, to me, an epitome of Australia-India collaboration. And I'd love to see more satellites being built and launched across the two countries.
That's a great ambition, Venkat. And Shireesh, going to be launching that satellite. What's that mean for Skyroot and your ambitions? How does partnering in initiatives like this anywhere in the world help grow your business?
So this is Shireesh, Vice President Business Development at Skyroot Aerospace, and we are developing the launch vehicles called Vikram series. And with these launch vehicles, we are opening space for all. Okay, as Rajat mentioned, like though access to space has become economical, but maneuvering in the space is still being costly. And the solutions what we are bringing forward is like with the orbit adjustment module what we have, we can precisely take the satellite to the exact location where they want to be in. And collaborating with Lal Connect 60 is we feel very proud of that, because the kind of solutions what they are offering is part of the sustainable development goals, and we being part of that is like we really feel proud for that one.
Firstly, I'm Anirudh Sharma, one of the co-founders and CEO at Digantara. We focus on space domain awareness and space situational awareness. Our core expertise lies in building sensors, mostly optical, and right now we are venturing into passive RF systems to be able to track objects in the orbit. So to answer your question, we started our company back in 2020 by getting incubated in India and Australia at the same time. We had global ambitions to start this as a global business, because space situational awareness and space domain awareness is clearly a segment that is not restricted to a particular geography. So it was very important for us to work with global players from our initial days. So that was the first thought about partnering with Australia. Going forward, we started developing sensors. These sensors are used to track objects, and these are electro-optical. We launched satellites to track objects in space. The partnership with Space Mission Company gives us one opportunity to work with an Australian company to be able to, supply our sensors to the mission and contribute to the sustainability. So as a space company, we've seen a lot of things change in last couple of years. One of the points that was mentioned here was access to space, and maneuvering is very expensive right now. You can change that by understanding what is happening in space, and this is similar to the aviation sector. I always draw analogies between maritime and aviation sector to space sector. We're at that inflection point or transformational point where we need more data of what's happening in space that will solve for a lot of problems apart from access of space, but also on the operational side. So this mission will demonstrate a lot of such capabilities, not only to track space objects or to focus on space sustainability, but also enhance the technology towards having sustainable space operations.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Nashid, when Venkat was talking before, he mentioned that West Australia government is a customer of his. I'm wondering how it feels to see a company that is born in Western Australia, that West Australian government is a customer of, start to expand internationally and do this partnership with India.
Thanks, Jeremy. And I think it's two ways, because Venkat is also our customer as we are his. But I think I look at it a few ways. One is the development of the space industry in Western Australia is a key priority, one of our 8 priorities. And we have been doing space for quite a while. But to see Lal Connect, which actually resides in the same building as us in Perth, to have grown exponentially. And we actually had a grant called the Infrastructure Investment Fund, which is a $100 million grant, which is actually there sort of designed to help grow our key industry sectors, space being one of those key sectors, and Lal Connect and Venkat was a recipient of that. And to see that growth, which then helped stem into the ISI grant, is just a beautiful way of showing how state and federal government support can actually help grow and catalyse a company. And then comes in Invest and Trade WA, where the investment arm, where we can say, here is a Western Australian company that is also, Western Australian government is actually procuring from this company, and now you're in an Indian market or an international market, and this gives a West Australian company a lot more credibility into the market, that they are engaging with the government at many, many levels. And as our role, it is about looking at G2G, which unlocks B2B. And, our sort of interaction with Venkat not only stems into India, we've also had some great work across the Gulf and Asia. So what that means is, you see this brand which is growing across the region, and it's such a great story to tell. And it also shows the power that, the federal government has, the state government has. But if we look at the investment arms, Leo Bidisha is working with Venkat as we are. So, that just shows the strength in how our respective networks can help grow and expand the business and help position it, and I think that's really, really important. For our Indian clients as well, I think the other piece is where we'd met Skyroot in about 2022, and that connection that was made during our minister's visit in March 2022, which led to the ISI grant, was also, again, that powerful statement about how our ministers, how our politicians are opening the doors and then helping with that market access, which sort of shows testament to how these missions and incoming outbound delegations are really, really important. If I talk about the future of tomorrow for space for us, it is about the exponential growth of space between Australia and India. I have to also pay tribute to the role of diaspora. If I look at the 3 first companies in space that I'd worked with, Raj from Cure Space, Venkat from Lal Connect, and Ram from Space Angel, who was the sort of door opener to this ecosystem, they're all from the diaspora. So, I think there is a strong connection there. And a very wise person who's probably not sitting in this room, but my dear colleague Hitendra Gandhi, who's our lead for innovation in space, he said, Nashid, we look at the US, India's looking at the US, and we're not looking at each other. But, like Leo says, this is the best time. The relationship is never as it was before. And it's really now the time to really catalyze and grow it, as Subbuji says very, very rightly so.
Great, thank you. And I touched on the theme of the conference before. We've talked about transforming tomorrow. The first part of that is bridging boundaries. And it seems to me that in getting the 60 applications, Arvind, Australian and Indian companies are starting to bridge those boundaries. I guess, Raj and Venkat, as you prosecute on your projects now, there may be more ahead that you need to cross. Can you talk about what some of those might be as you execute on the project and do more business here in India?
So look, one of the reasons why we wanted to have a big ambitious project around the May 3 mission was, it was not just about the technology side of it. It was how do we build sustainable supply chain partnerships, both at the education level, at capability level. India's had a long heritage of space. In Australia, we're still young and there's a lot to learn. And so I think when we start to look at how do we, and Mr. Pavuluri talked about how in some ways we're similar. And so how do you operate in a constrained environment and still get innovation in space? So I think there's a lot to exchange, both educationally, capability, technology development, innovation, commercial market, Indian space market from a customer point of view, both commercial, civil, and defense. There's lots of opportunities for companies on both ends. And so as we go forward in the next couple of years and execute on this project, we see a lot of relationship building happening between the two organizations, but a lot broader as a whole. So we hope that this is one way of telling our government back in Australia that these type of projects work really well and they've got to support them more with additional funding.
Venkat, what do you reckon?
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree with what Raj was saying. And I guess I'll add and echo what Mr. Subba was saying earlier, that I think, it needs to cut both ways, but with much greater funding. From my point of view, though, as well, I think we need to be less hung up on who manufactures what and who builds what, but doing it collaboratively and doing it together. I think there's a lot that we can learn from India. I'll just sort of personally say that, before founding Lal Connect 60, I worked in the Canadian space industry and I worked on the RadarSat constellation mission. And even as part of the RadarSat program, I personally had dealings with members of ISRO, members of the Indian space community who are way ahead in terms of SAR technology back then. So, the Canadians as well were learning from the Indians. I think we all need to accept and understand that there's a lot to learn, a lot to develop But what I think the benefit is, at least from Lal Connect 60's point of view and going through this program, is what we hope to achieve is really the best of both worlds. We have the geographical advantage of Australia and the access to the Southeast Asian or markets there, which India can then benefit through working with us, and we could then benefit from the capability and the infrastructure that India has and can provide in these missions, and we could build together and grow together, and that's really where Lal Connect is seeing the future here.
And maybe deviating a bit from just talking about the ISI program, Anirudh, with the space domain awareness capability you're building, it's often talked about in Australia that our landmass is suitable for hosting lots of sensors because we can see lots of sky. Does that present an opportunity for you in the future?
Absolutely. Right now, we're focusing on building one such systems in India. So in the northern part of India, in a place called Ladakh, where we are hosting one of our optical systems for space domain awareness. And while we were doing an analysis of the landmass that is suitable for STA, I think Australia was the number one priority after I think a couple of other places like Chile, in the middle of Atacama Desert. So I think we are already working towards building better partnerships in Australia with especially Australian universities who are working on space domain awareness, where we can co-host an observatory or build sensors. Like, for example, the Western Sydney University is working on neuromorphic sensors right now for space domain awareness. So we're kind of looking at such opportunities where we can invest and co-host sensors for space domain awareness that can be part of our global network.
Excellent. Several of our panelists have called for more funding from perhaps both governments into this sort of initiative. And this sort of program, I guess, is a bit of a pathfinder. We call it a grant in Australia. Another sort of funding that occurs to me from government is to be actually buying capability for the sake of the country. But we might not go down that rabbit hole. A third sort, and I noted Skyroot's raised close to $100 million in private capital investment for their business, is private capital markets. So I'm wondering, and I'm actually genuinely curious, what are the opportunities for Australian companies to be sourcing private capital in India and Indian companies to be looking to the private capital markets in Australia? Who wants to have a crack at that?
One second only. It is believed that Australia and India were together, in the sense millions of years ago. That entire thing is one continent. Then the plates moved away, Australia. So the Australia was created, and the Indian side moved away, and this Himalayas were created. That's what generally they're said from the geology point of view. That means you see many of the trees or many of the birds or whatever, very commonality between the two countries on that. That being the case, I think we should explore the possibilities of how we together can tackle the space as a whole. Not necessarily looking at whatever the money that has been given by Australian government for doing this activity today, $18 million, could be a beginning, a good beginning. I think together we should explore the possibilities of what can be done. Can you do something for the Mars together? Or, because, whenever we launch something, that has to be always tracked in Australia. Position accuracy part of it, that comes from the Australian, and they have been collaborating with us for long years. I think we should think of doing something much bigger than this, what has been done on that. So kindly look at that, and maybe you can represent to the government.
Yeah, I can talk about private investments, because we've raised a couple of millions for us. So when it comes to raising funds in the space industry, it's not similar to the other sectors. There are a lot of things that go into picture. One of the things is, like, Indian companies have been able to raise funds so far. It's mainly because of signaling, because there is positive signaling from the government to build a domestic economy in India. The second thing is, when it comes to private markets and what opportunities does Australian companies have to, let's say, access to Indian funding, I think, to be very honest, today, as of today, it's very limited, because most of the funds have mandate to invest in certain regions, and that becomes difficult for, let's say, an Indian private venture capital firms to invest in another geography-based companies. Having said that, there are a lot of global funds right now who are looking into space investments. So I think that should present a global opportunity equally to be it Australian companies or Indian companies to raise investments from venture capital or private markets. But having said that, I think I've heard this from a lot of Australian companies. To raise private capital in Australia is very difficult at this point in time. And that is something that I've been constantly hearing from investors and startups based in Australia. I think that has to change, and that can only be done through the government. Government has to provide some comfort to the private market capitals or venture capital firms that, we are here to create an economy, and hence you should invest in this sector, and that's what changed in India.
So if I could just add a slightly different dimension to that, as a company that was not VC funded or PE funded, we actually raised money, because we did have to raise money in the early days, through corporates. And finding aligned corporates or strategic corporates that see a business value in helping you expand geographically, either through resellership or through agency into specific markets. That's another way of looking at it. So for example, we've done this quite well in Southeast Asia. We've got investors, even though we're an Australian company, we've got Malaysian investors, we've got Indonesian investors. If we went to the VC funds in Malaysia and Indonesia, yes, they won't invest in an Australian company. But we went to strategic corporates who knew that the services that we could provide would be valuable in country for them. And they wanted to be our local market representative. They had certain value-added services they could tack on to what we are doing. So they invested in us. And so they win both ways. They win from selling our services in country. They also win from the overall growth of Lal Connect 60. So if such a model could be applied in India with strategic corporates to see the value, for example, in our data and services in the Indian market, and building together or leveraging each other's strengths, potentially that kind of investment might happen.
May I add? Yeah. So
Everyone wants in.
So the three things which I would like to highlight here. So first one is the technology and the demand, okay, which need to be shown, okay, and that would be followed by the regulatory. That is where it would give more comfort to the investors. So in our case, for Skyroot or the Indian ecosystem, when after the policy of 2020, the investments number has been significantly increased. Okay, this clearly indicates that the confidence in the investors have rose because of the regulatory policies which have been established. If we are speaking about Australia, like the current policies, how are they garnering more demand, and also the technology for the innovations, how it is being brought forward, is something which we need to look into it. And this ISA initiative is something quite interesting in those directions, because of the collaborations between the India and Australia. Most of the TOT, there is a possibility of TOT to happen, and also these collaborations can continue and generate a new demand, okay, which would eventually create more startups, and that will compel regulators to come up with the new policies that would infuse the interest into the investors, and that it will build their confidence.
I can't speak for the Indian sort of market, but I think from an Australian perspective, when you look at deep tech, and especially deep tech, upstream space tech, you realize that you need a pretty strong demand signal. I think a demand signal helps, and I think Anirudh touched on it. And that demand signal comes in form of government large projects or procurement. And so for startups in Australia, I think to access private capital, the best thing that can happen is those demand signals. And we're seeing demand signals from Indian customers. Unfortunately, those demand signals are directed at Indian startups, which is great for Indian startups. And so I think trying to bridge that gap, yes, ideally it can be done, but I think it poses a challenge. So when we have projects like this, where governments clearly showing an intent to invest at some level on demand signals, which cater to both sides, it actually attracts private capital on both sides of, whether that's India and Australia. So even since the announcement of this grant, we've had a lot of really interesting, really positive conversations. So I think to your earlier comment, as a pathfinder, I think it's a good thing. I think we've got to build on top of this because it will raise confidence across investors that, we always get this feedback that India-US corridor is the corridor to invest as far as space is concerned. And I think there's significant amount of work going on with Center for Australia-India Relations and a bunch of things that make this as a very successful corridor between Australia and India.
We're running very short of time, but Nashid?
Just probably a plug-in for Indian companies here that we have the Perth Landing Pad, and that is an opportunity where companies can expand out and gain access to the venture capital markets that we have, the growth of our ecosystem, grants, programs, etc. So when you talk about access to grants, access to funding, our policies in Western Australia have really been developed and grown quite exponentially to be able to enable that. So that is a welcome to all, and you can see the success of amazing products, especially what Lal Connect is doing. So we'd love to see more of that happening.
Checking the time. Yes, we are out of time. Thank you everyone for your attention today. Can you please give a round of applause to our panellists?
That was some thought-provoking views and insightful session by our panel. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us for this session. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes day 1 of track 2 of India Space Congress 2024. We would break here for networking tea coffee, which is right outside the hall. And I request you all to please join us back in CBR1, that is the first main hall, for the closing remarks and the last session of the day. Thank you very much. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Thank you very much. May I request the panel to please pose for a group photograph. May we have the photographer, please? The Prakash sir also to please join the panel for a group photograph.